Welcome to week 4, day 15 of the summer 2025 database driven web development course. I'm Jim Kaufman with Rankin Technical College. First, just want to kind of mention that, believe it or not, we're already about midway through this week. We'll be a fourth of the way through this course. Time does fly. Before you know it, we'll be halfway through sooner than you think. So things definitely go very quickly. So today, just kind of wanted to go over, Lab 0202, why we're building an issue tracker, discuss that a little bit. And we're going to go over the application requirements for the final project because a lot of these labs will be part of the final project. So kind of wanted to going to go over that a little bit. And then going to go ahead and do a, very quick introduction to data modeling. Data modeling, we could do a whole semester on data modeling. So just going to kind of spend a few minutes, not a lot, kind of quick little brief overview, especially from a perspective of MongoDB, because different data modeling, different for MongoDB from that perspective than it is for relational type databases. And then from there, we're just going to go ahead and install an extension for Draw.io so we can create our own data model for our issue tracker. And then we're going to create our ERD. ERD stands for Entity Relational Diagram. So we're going to be creating that. And then go ahead and after that, we're going to go ahead and kind of implement. We're going to put populate a little data into our database for the issue tracker. I'm just going to show you a few, and then you're going to kind of do the rest from there. And as far as assignments for this week, you basically got 3 assignments. So it's going to be a little bit of a busy week here. So today we're going to talk about the 0202 lab, and then tomorrow we'll talk about there's going to be some additional assignment for the MFlix MongoDB assignment for 0203. And then we also have a written test. So we have 3 assignments this week. All right. So let's look at our lab here. Just move this over here. So, I really recommend you go ahead and check out the video. The number one coding project idea guaranteed to get you a software development job. Some people swear by this, that, this is a very, a very good project to do. Because there's a lot involved in it. Plus, it kind of gives you an idea of a little bit on how things are done in a different companies, different organizations on tracking systems. So, there's different idea, can be called different things. Issue tracker, bug tracker, right? Ticketing system. Now, when you work for an organization, generally you're going to come in, let's say, you're just starting out. There's always going to be, and they may have multiple different ticket systems, okay? It may not just be one system, but, everything usually goes through a ticketing system, and not just for software and bugs. I'm just saying for employment. You go in somewhere, there's a whole, there's a whole list of different things that happen as coming in someplace as a new employee. And, there's a whole list of things. And so usually they have some kind of a workflow, a ticketing system where, okay, new employee orientation, there's all these different steps to take. And so a lot of times they have ticketing systems for that, okay? And those ticketing systems can also, include lots of other things as well, okay? And sometimes, there's the ones for usually entering bugs are different than a overall ticketing system. So there's kind of like maybe 2 different kinds at least in, an organization, if not more. But so just kind of wanted to kind of, explain a little bit the differences from a ticketing system. But, a ticketing system can also be referred to as a bug tracker and issue tracker, or an issue or a ticketing system can be a little more general, where it's, like I said, onboarding new employees, requesting software. You may be requesting software because a lot of times you don't just go in and kind of usually download whatever you want and get what there's a system, there's a approval processes and all that. So usually they use a ticketing system for things like that. But for what we're doing for our thing, our perspective is more from a software. We're building software, and when you build software, usually there's some kind of a ticketing system, issue tracker, bug tracker. So when there's problems with the software, those different ones can be so there could be documentation on any kind of a problem there is or whatever. Okay. But I do suggest you spend a couple minutes reading through this. Look at this video, read through this. I know I probably mentioned this already once before. Here's some popular platforms. So sometimes they have internal ones, internal bug trackers, and that's what we're actually doing. We're creating our own internal bug tracker, right? And then some use, products that already exist. So here's like Bugzilla is a very popular one. Download it, new bug, stuff like that, right? You can do a lot more with it than that, though. But, spend a few minutes, take a look at that a little bit, okay? So as far as application requirements, here, what else would I want to kind of mention here? There's a couple things in here. Issue trackers are used by software development teams, obviously, right? Needs to be done. Gaining familiarity with such systems and insights to both how software teams operate and how various features can be implemented. These skills will serve well regardless of what employer you work for. I know there was something else I wanted to kind of mention on this. But another thing about the issue tracker is building this issue tracker. It's a good one so you can explain the different hurdles that you've had kind of creating this, and give a little perspective. It's kind of important to have some projects where you can explain what you were trying to achieve here. And the good thing is everybody really knows what like an issue tracker is, whereas we just have some miscellaneous little project, little labs and stuff. They may not understand that, but everybody knows what a ticketing system is and a bug tracker and that. And you can kind of talk about how we designed it and everything, and how you did the diagramming and everything else. And so there's a lot of very good pieces to this issue tracker. A lot of positive things you can say and things you can demonstrate to an employer, so to speak. So, all right. Okay, so for these are the basic application requirements. So we're going to be doing a little bit more than this, and I'll show you why. But basically, the core entities are bugs and users, and you're going to have some leeway. You can be creative on how you want to do things. You don't have to. Some things you're going to have to follow. There's going to be some basic requirements you're going to need to follow. Okay, for just this lab and also for the final project overall. But there's some things, but there's going to be other things that you can use your own creativity, your own ideas on how you want to implement it. Okay, but the core entities are going to be bugs and users. Okay, the following information is required for all users: email, password, full name, given name, family name, and role. So, make sure that you're, these are the required ones. So make sure, you don't accidentally skip those or miss those. Users can log into the system using their email address and password. Users can have different roles, such as developer, business analyst, quality analyst, project manager, and technical manager. Okay? Any user can create a bug. Any of these users can create a bug, okay? And all bugs must contain the following information. So you need to make sure that you have all of these fields at a minimum, right? And when we go through a few things today, I'm gonna be adding additional fields than just these, okay? And like I said, you can add additional fields as well. That's up to you. Any user can edit the bugs that they created. Bugs can be assigned to developers, business analysts, and quality analysts is also called QA. And business analysts are a lot of called BAs, usually like developers, BAs, and QA, right? These users can modify the bugs that they are assigned to, but not bugs that they did not create or are not assigned to. Okay. So if you're assigned a bug, then you can go ahead and modify it. That they are assigned to. All right. I'll wait. I just was kind of wondering because you're going to have a author of a bug. I guess, yeah, it's fine to do that. I'm wondering if that should be kind of more. Obviously, a bug's going to have to be modified by the, by the person that's assigned to it. Okay, we'll just leave that. I have some questions on that to a certain degree. Okay, all edits must be tracked. So what's an edit? So an edit is a lot of times in software development, when you've got using databases and you're changing data, when something gets changed, besides it just being in the database, you made a change in the database, it's always a good idea to track that change. Who made that change? When was that change made? What was made? Okay, so it's kind of an important part of a lot of systems is also tracking. So that's what edits are kind of. That's kind of a word from it's been from a traditional standpoint. It's kind of been around a long time. Edits, edits are what's been changed, right? Edits. So anyone can add comments to a bug, regardless who created it or who is assigned to it. And that's why I was thinking that this kind of makes more sense to me, and maybe we need to reword this a little bit. So obviously, if regardless of who created it, so I think these users can modify the bugs that they are assigned to, but I would think also the author. So we have an author to a bug too. Okay, there's an author. The person who created the bug is the author of the bug. And I would think both the author and the person who's assigned the bug should be able to modify it. So we can talk about that later. Comments cannot be edited. So once they're there, we'll have to prevent them from being edited. Business analysts can classify bugs. There'll also be classifications. Approved, unapproved, duplicate. By default, bugs must be unclassified. Quality analysts can add test cases to bugs. So quality analysts are usually like your testing team, right? Part of the testing team. They may be some very technical people. Sometimes they're not always the technical person. It all depends on the organization and how roles are really defined within a team. So it could be a little different. But so QA, the QAs, the quality analysts can add test cases to bugs and mark them as pass and fail. Bugs can have multiple test cases. So developers can't add test cases, right? So, it's something like when we're building this thing, early on, we're not going to be addressing some of these things, but later on, we'll have to address these things when, like if a developer logs in and tries to add a test case, they shouldn't be able to add a test case, right? We'll have like if statements, whatever, right, for that. Developers can track the amount of time and hours they spend on a bug. Developers can submit hours multiple times, so there just will need to be added to it. Developers can note what version of the software will be released and when the fix was made to the code. So, just for a minute on this. So, when you're working on a project somewhere, most of the time there's like a release schedule. They don't just usually release things just whenever. Usually, there's some kind of a release cycle, and there might be, and it depends. Sometimes them are very long release cycles because a lot of things have to happen in a release cycle. It's more than just you making a change, you committing your code and then getting thrown out in production. The testing has to happen. There has to be approvals and sign-offs. A lot of times they have different systems, different processes that will scan the software, scan what you have, make sure that there's no, from like viruses and things like that. So usually there's a very, large, cumbersome process in doing that, right? And in some places it's they've got it down where it's much more quicker. Other places it might be much slower. But the fact is there's a process. Usually you have like a release schedule. Maybe that's like it could be once a month. It could be longer than that. It could be once a week. And then also there's situations where in organizations that there's kind of an emergency, like something got deployed that we didn't realize was a problem. It went through testing. We never seen it in testing, but once it got to production, we realized we got a problem. And they do kind of what's called like an emergency, emergency deployment, right? But and every time you do a deployment, usually you have in your system you have a way to track the release, a number. Every release has usually a build associated with it, and it has a build number, so it has a release number as well. And so that release number is going to change every time that a new version of that software goes to your production environment, right? So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the version of the software, just like you've seen. I'm sure you've seen, even if you kind of go into Chrome, you can go into Chrome. It'll tell you about Chrome, tell you the release version right there, right? So there's your release version of Chrome. Okay. All right. Business analysts can close bugs when they are released to customers, but all previous information must be retained indefinitely. Okay. So obviously you're not going to have to worry about all of this right now today. This is kind of just a first pass through on these, but you're gonna have to come back to this, and when you get done, with your final project, all of this stuff will have to be working correctly, and you need to make sure that you follow this. Okay. All right. So let's see what this says. I was wondering why it causes it really phase 2 here, but that's okay. Well, I guess phase 1 was the first thing where we created the user.js, we created the bug.js, the first thing we did on our final project. This is kind of the second part of that, okay? But we're not going to necessarily, we're not going to be including our artifacts, so to speak, the things we're going to be working on. We're going to be putting this in our labs folder, okay? We're going to put this in our labs folder, not in the final project folder, okay? So next here, we're going to go ahead and design. We're going to create what's called a entity relational diagram, okay? And we're going to use draw.io. And before I do that, I think real quick, I'm just going to, so this is all about, entity resource diagram is basically about, is basically about data modeling, And so let's just talk about data modeling a little bit here. And so, like I said, earlier, data modeling could be a whole semester, even more. You could have multiple courses on data modeling, right? There's a lot involved in that. But basically, data modeling is the process of creating a visual representation of how your data is organized and related within a system. It defines the structure of data, including their entities, their attributes, and their relationships between them, to ensure consistency, efficiency, and clarity in the data storage and retrieval. Okay. Now, for everybody who's in this course, you've already been through C#. There's a couple people have already did the other database driven 2 course, the one that's related to the C# one for the second year course. But you're very familiar with the relational database. So all of you have a little bit of knowledge of relational databases, and so you know that in a relation database you basically have tables, you have rows, you have columns. Okay, whereas in MongoDB, and I touched on this before, but in MongoDB you have documents, you have collections, right? You have a database that's basically of collections, and those collections have multiple documents, right? So it's a little different. So it's kind of a paradigm shift, because MongoDB offers a more flexible and powerful approach. Okay. So Mongo database, the heart of the Mongo database is a document. Think of a document as a JSON-like record, but it's actually BISON, or whatever you want to call it, BSON, BSON, which is binary. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation, whereas BSON, BSON is binary script object notation. And with BSON was really made for MongoDB, and it's actually, you can add some additional type of data types, like a dates, and JSON's more, JSON's always name, value, pairs, strings, right? It's kind of limited to a certain extent, whereas BSON is binary, and it's really more for computers to read, right? But you've got you can do dates with that. You can do and you have object IDs. So there's other functionality, other data types there, and it's just like made to be more efficient, so to speak, right? It's from a binary standpoint as opposed to kind of human readable. It's a self-contained unit of data, and unlike rows in a relational database, a document can have varying structures. And this flexibility is one of MongoDB's greatest strengths. So one thing, it's kind of good and bad. So like relational database is very, you have to follow all the rules, and things have to be a certain way. Whereas MongoDB is very flexible, which, there's good points to that, but then there's also bad points to that, especially because you can create a document one way, right? You could create a user. Let's say you're going to create a user document. You could create it one way, and then you could come back and do another user document and do it differently. The problem is when you start calling that within your code's going to be kind of expecting it to be one way or another. So, sometimes what you're going to probably end up doing here, I know myself what happens is, sometimes you start out with something, you say, I want to add something. Well, you got to kind of add that to all your documents, right? You're going to have to, if you start making some changes, because, you get to a point where you're calling stuff in your code, and you're expecting it to be there and it's not there. So, there's good and bad sometimes with that. Okay, so just kind of wanted to point that out. So sometimes you have to blow away your data. That's why it's kind of good to kind of keep what you inserted, so you can kind of update those, and you can actually blow away your data and reinsert everything again. We'll talk about that later, but just wanted to point that out. So MongoDB documents are stored in collections. A collection is analogous to a table in a relational database, but with a crucial difference: it doesn't enforce a schema. All relational databases enforce a schema. You can have documents with completely different fields within the same collection. This is what we call schemaless or schemaless design. Key principles. I'm not going to go through too much of this, but real quick, just for your own personal knowledge, MongoDB has in the relational world. Let me go from this direction. In the relational world, we strive for normalization to reduce data redundancy, and what that means is basically you've got, let's say you've got a table, and inside that table you've got products, and so there might be some fields where you've got things you're copying, groups of data, right, all in there that can be used across multiple tables. And when you've got any kind of data that can be used across multiple tables, it's best not to have that in each table. You should have a separate table, and you refer to that table, and that's where you use the foreign keys to associate one table to another, right? In relational databases, that's what's kind of normalizing the data, is to reduce data redundancy, where you're copying like data. It's the same data in different parts of a table, whereas you can just create a separate table for that, right? So, just like even like addresses and stuff like that, right? But one thing about Mongo is there's the idea of embracing denormalization. You can actually embed related data directly into your document. You can actually embed that right into that document. So for our users and bugs, you can actually just only create those two and embed all the other stuff in there. And there's good and bad reasons for that, okay? And let's just kind of review that real quick. And that's about all. I don't want to spend too much time on this. So embedding versus referencing, right? Referencing is basically you've got it in a different collection from a MongoDB standpoint. You're referencing data from one collection to another collection. Whereas embedding, you just have the one collection, and you could have documents within documents, right? So this is a decision point when you design a system. Okay, so just talk about embedding and referencing, just basically what I was saying there. So the choice between embedding and referencing, the factors like frequency of access. If data is always accessed together, embed it, right? If you're always going to need that data, then you should this is what it's kind of suggested, embed it. Data size, if embedded data makes the document too large, reference it, okay? Update frequency, if embedded data changes frequently, referencing might be better to avoid updating large parent documents, okay? Also in complexity, a lot of times it's easier just to have it in a separate thing. And for the most part, and this is an area where you've got the option. If you want to embed a lot of it, you can embed it. That's up to you. I'm going to create an ERD where I'm going to actually have it into different collections. And I think it makes it easier to just show that. and it helps also show relationships as well. But that's all. I don't want to get too far into this any more than this. But the important thing I just want to point out here is just realize that MongoDB is different than a relational database. Relational database has tables, column, rows, whereas MongoDB has documents and collections. And know that that MongoDB is very flexible. Very flexible. You can create a user document, and then you can come back and create another user document and even put different fields in there and everything else. It doesn't even have to necessarily even be the same. Now, like I already said, there's the only concern about that is when you're getting into your code, if you're expecting certain things, if they're not there, then you got to kind of work on that. But it's a quick way, especially in, like we kind of talked about waterfall and like a more agile approach. Waterfall is where you come up with all your requirements, you spend all this time up front getting everything nailed down on how your application is going to work and everything. And that's really was always very good with a relational database. This is everything. You can create your tables. You have everything set up, very, based on all those requirements. Everything's been signed off on. Whereas when you're using something, a methodology like Agile, where you don't necessarily do all the requirements. You have some base requirements. This is what we're kind of looking for. We're going to flush things out as we go along, right? We're going to change some things as we're going. It's much more dynamic in that. And that really helps with something like MongoDB. You can make some changes because you're not tied to that schema. It's a pain in the rear if you've got a relational database. You've got all these tables, everything set up. Then also you need to keep on changing these. Whereas in MongoDB, you can very quickly just change things. You don't have a schema to follow. It's much more fluid and much more dynamic. Okay. All right, so next we're going to go ahead and start working our ERD. So first, let's open up here. Let's go, and I'm hoping that the guys who are online with me can kind of follow along with me on this. So first, I would go into your labs folder under lab 02 _ 02 and just create a directory called ERD. Okay, just create a directory called ERD and then open that up into Visual Studio Code. So we want to open up our ERD and that directory. So for mine, it's not going to tell you that. I hate that. Don't do that. That's okay. All right. And then the next thing is go to extensions. What you're going to want to do is go ahead and you can search for this. I've already got mine, but this is the Draw.io integration. Draw.io integration. Okay. So then go ahead and install this. Install this one. Okay, so now we want to come in here and create a file. Just right-click, new file, and do ERD dot, and then put draw.io, all one word. Don't put a dot in between the draw and io. So ERD dot draw.io. Then you should come to, if you do, it should automatically populate your window like this. And then in here, first thing we want to do is go ahead and do more shapes. I already have mine selected, but you're going to want to go ahead and select entity relationship. So we're going to be doing entities as opposed to like tables. So hit apply there. I do want to just real quick. So where is the table? Let me see what they have on here. I know they've changed it from different times. So, okay. So, yeah, first thing I wanted to mention, here, let me make this bigger. That'll help. Now, we're not going to do it this way, but I'm just showing you. This is a table. This is kind of, and this is like a primary key, foreign key. So this is more, from a perspective of, not that you can't use a table like this. Actually, you probably wouldn't want to do something quite that complicated, but you could do it like this if you want it. The unique ID is going to be kind of like your, in Mongo, you've got a underscore ID field, which it's also called the object ID. You could do that like that because that is, in essence, kind of the primary key is that, but really kind of the best one to use would be the entity one. So in here, let's clear. Okay, let me see. Come in here, and it helps if I grab the right one. Is this one down here? It's called the entity one. So you can just kind of drag this over here. All right. The little plus signs, if you want to leave them, that's fine. Or you can just kind of remove them. We're going to, when we add fields to this. If you want to, keep them there, that's fine. Basically, plus signs is kind of remember that we kind of did some of this in the C# class. Plus was for public, and a dash is for private. And also a pound sign or a hash is for protected. So those were the three kinds. For most of what we're going to do, we're not really going to be concerned about that at this point in time. So if you don't have to have those plus signs in there, if you want to leave them, that's fine. You can leave them or you can get rid of them. We're just going to kind of put the fields. So as far as an entity, an entity is, a noun, it's a thing, right? It's an entity. So for us, for our case, what we're going to have is a user, right? And most of the time here, what you do on this kind of best practices, you kind of want to put it as an uppercase like that. And you don't really want to use S plural because each user, basically, each one of these is basically your document, right? You're mapping. This is a document. This is my entity, which is my document, my user document, and what's all the fields that are going to be in my user document, right? And this is going to have relationships with other collections as well, right? Well, I shouldn't say collections, with other entities, right? Now, from a standpoint, kind of thinking that in a little different way. So, from us mapping this out as entities, we're thinking this as a singular thing, a user, right? An individual user, as opposed to a collection is going to be users. It's probably best usually to use an S on that because it's a collection of users, right? A collection, multiple users is in a user's collection, whereas here just one entity would be user. All right. So first, what we kind of want to do, and go back to our document here. So let's see what we're doing here. Create a bug, create a user. So our users are going to have email, right? Email, password, full name, given name, family name, role. Okay. So here, let me pull up something here over my side. So here, you can think of this being a user ID. But which would be an object ID here. in MongoDB. Okay, but so what we're going to do though, instead, having a user ID and then a bug ID, from a discussion standpoint, it makes sense. But within Mongo itself, Mongo always has does these underscore IDs. So we're just going to do that for each one that we create. Each entity, we're going to have underscore ID. Okay. So I'm going to be doing a few different ones here. Let's see what was originally in this list. Email, password, given name, full, yeah, okay. All right. So we kind of just want to add all of our ones here. So that was the first one was our okay, let me stop that right away. Okay, that's not going to work exactly like I wanted to, is it? That's all right. All right, so here we're going to have what? Email. And that's going to be a type of string. And then we're going to have what? Password. And that's going to be a type of string as well. And if you want, you could just kind of, for your own purposes, you can mark this as hashed, because we're going to create a hash of the password. All right. I'm kind of used to using a different one here. And then we're going to go ahead and add full name here. And it's probably best in most cases to do the camel case here. And then, so full name, and then we're going to do given name. Family name. And role. All right. I hope you guys can see this on your screens, though. Okay, so that's our user object. We have a user ID, email, password, full name, given name, family name, and role. So our next one, we're going to create a bug. All right. And in here, let's see if this is going to work for me. So in here, we're going to have a bug ID, which here, once again, we should change this to just underscore lowercase ID. I think I changed this and messed this up. Underscore ID. help a little bit with room. Just want to make sure we have the right fields here. So for bugs, what do we have here for bugs? Title, description, steps to reduce, author of bug, date, classification. So these are the ones that are kind of basically required, right? But, you know, to add a little more functionality, you know, so we have an ID, which is going to be a specific bug ID, object ID of a bug. So when you create a new bug, you don't have to specify the ID. Mongo's going to automatically create an ID for you. Okay, when we insert a new bug. Title is going to be the title of the bug, description of the bug. Then you're going to have steps to reproduce. So very, very common thing to always have in a bug is, you know, how do I reproduce this? Otherwise, then the person looking at it's got to contact the user saying, how did you do it? And obviously, it's always easier once a user has a problems and getting ready to submit something, a problem, when that it's recently, you know, it's they just did it, so it's in their mind right now. So you want to capture those steps to reproduce right away, instead of later on. Author is who created the bug. Okay. Now here we can go ahead and have like this user ID, right? Because this is references the user table, so it kind of helps for you to kind of realize what you're referencing. But even though that's user ID, it's really the ID of the user that's in this table, or not table, in this entity. Created on being a date, the date the bug was created. Classification, okay, classification. So there could be different classifications. Let's see what we had on that. Approved, could classify bugs as approved, unapproved, duplicate. All right. And that's the minimum. Not that you couldn't have other ones as well. Approved, unapproved, or duplicate, or unclassified. So it basically has 4 different ones. By default, it's going to be unclassified. Okay. Last updated, last time the bug was updated. Okay. Assigned to. So obviously, you know, when you create a bug, you're going to have an author, because the person who's creating the bug for the first time is going to be the author of the bug, right? Created on. So you're going to have all of those fields right here. You should have all of these fields down. Classification will be unclassified at the beginning, all right? Last update. You could set the last update being the created on date for the first time when you create a new bug. Or I guess it could be empty. So you do have, you know, like I said, you have some latitude and stuff, how you want to create things. How you want this ERD to look is really kind of up to you. And a lot of this, like I said, you could just have a user and bug and all the other things, because we're going to create a few different other entities. You can actually embed them right inside of your entities if you want. I find it a little easier to separate them out some. And also you have comments, an array of comments, and assign to, you know, and like I said, you know, you might want to change this later on or not. It's kind of up to you. So assign to, do you want to assign it to, could a problem be assigned to more than one user? Could it be assigned to like more than one developer? If something's big, maybe this is something I'm going to assign to 2 different developers to take a look at, to work on together. And so you'd have 2 people, right? It's something significant, right? Comments, be multiple comments. a resolve date when it was resolved, resolution, how was it resolved, hours logged, right? How many how many hours it took for you to correct it, software version, what software version was it in, test cases, and what we're saying bug edits here. And kind of what I mentioned earlier, edits basically that you made some changes to this bug, and where's that tracked at? Obviously, it could be embedded right in here, or you can have a separate entity for edits. Okay. So as far as a relationship goes with this, let's look at this. So, what's the relationship of user to a bug, right? A user can author many bugs, right? A user could be an author for many bugs, so it could create multiple bugs, right? But a bug has only one author, okay? So there's different relationships, and what we're going to do here on that, it's going to be one optional to many. Optional to many. So this is basically a one-to-many relationship. One user to many bugs. Okay, so we're going to click on this. You got to drag this. You got to drag this. It's always fun to do this. And you'll be moving it around different places. So, as you can see, this is like one to many. Has three different prongs on this, right? This thing here is called like crow's feet. You got three of them here. Here, let's go look at what crow's feet is here real quick. Crow's feet notation. Let's see what we can come up here with this. It's showing an entity in this, different relationships. It's not really what I think it'd be better off just looking at the images here. Having 1 to 0, like 1 to 0, one and only one, 0 to many, 1 to many. Okay? There's different relationships. And that's what the crow's feet is. Okay? Let's see if this is a better one here. Yeah. Summary of crow's foot notation. 1 to 0, 1 and only 1. 0 or many. Okay? 1 or many. So it's relationship from one entity to another. Okay? And then in our case here, like we said, we have a one users debugs. The user debug. A user can author many bugs, but a bug has only one author. Okay. A user can be assigned to many bugs, but the bug is assigned to one user. That was the assigned to. Okay. We've got two. So we have some different relationships there. Okay. Actually, there's kind of two different relationships here on this user to bug. There's the author to the bug, and then there's also the assigned to. Okay. They're both a user ID, an ID, right? So, author, the person created it, and then also you have the assigned to. All right. Okay, so next let's go ahead and create comments. And you can move stuff around however you want on here. It doesn't have to be in a certain order. It just because actually a lot of things will point to bugs than more than users. You know, actually I'm thinking almost users might be better off over there than over here, to be honest with you. Yeah, well, let me just leave it like it is for right now. All right. So here we've got comments. I guess here, same thing. You know, really don't need to be plural. It's a comment. Each one's going to be a comment. Each document's going to be a comment. It's a comment entity. All right. So what do we have for that one? We didn't really have much on the comment here, did it? It really didn't give a lot of information. To a bug. Oh, yeah, it does. Author, date, time of creation. All right. Like I said, you know, there's a minimal amount of things you have to do, and, you know, it's whatever works for you as well. And, you know, this can change. This is, you get this done. This isn't your final, you know, this isn't your final version of this. It's kind of actually just like your first version of that for the grade for this week's lab. But you know, this is really going to be part of that whole final project. So you may update this, you'll change it, and it needs to match at the end when you submit your final project. All right. So we have three different ones here, I guess. Basically, common ID, the content, you know, the comment itself, and the created on date. And here, we're just going to go ahead and change this to underscore ID. So for a comment, you'll have it like that. Okay. And for your relationship, it's going to be kind of the same thing. A lot of these are going to be this one to many. So this is going to be probably have to flip this though, I think. Okay, that's not making me very happy here. So we got a bug. Obviously, I'm not very good at this. This is different than what I'm kind of. There we go. Still not. It's kind of irritating me. So kind of move this around a little bit. It seems to work a little better for me. Having Bug over here and User over here. Bug has a lot more associations. Okay, so we got that one. And then we also have edits. So we need to include the edits as well. Let's grab another entity. Oh, that's the wrong one. Call that edit like that. All right. So for this one, we'll have edit ID. So here we obviously are always going to have an ID. So underscore ID. Change date. And then possibly, like I said, this stuff's optional, however you kind of really want to do it. And then we could have like a changes, kind of basically, it's almost like a changes is going to be like a JavaScript object, an embedded object here. Document changes, and then operation being maybe like, update, whatever, kind of a CRUD type things, whatever, update, delete, whatever. And then an editor will be a user ID. Okay. And then the same thing here is going to be, so for edits here, we're going to have we'll be associating this editor, a user ID. Well, really, this would be a bug ID, wouldn't it? Well, we have a user ID. We have bug edit ID. So another relationship here. It's probably going to be basically the same thing, the one-to-many. It's one bug, kind of multiple edits. Okay, and then what else we have? Test cases. We'll create another entity for that. Actually, for that one, where's that over here? Can we move this all the way up here? Move this down here. Okay. And then here we want to do it. Another entity here. And we'll call this test cases. And actually it should just be singular test case. And then for test case, have test case ID, underscore ID for the test case. So we'll have to work on all of these. They won't be a finished project for a while. And hopefully I'll get better at using this Draw.io. I was used to using the other one, the one we did for the C# course. Okay, let's see. So we're basically going to do, let's see, for relationships here. What's the relationship here? For test cases, the test case field, you have an array of test cases. All right. So bug has a test case. Many bugs can reference or be associated with the same test case. So yeah, that relationship's a little different. Maybe. All right. So for test cases, so we'll do one-to-many here for same for bugs and that. And then our relationship between the user and the test case. So I think here for test case to user, we want to do this one. So yeah, a test case is going to belong to one user, and one user is going to only have one. Each test case is going to have one user. I don't know. For now, we're going to leave it like that, though. That was that. So we have our bugs, user, bug, user, edit, comment, and test case. So we should be good with that. Okay, so once you have your diagram, you know, you don't have to be finished, but at a point where you need to save it, go up here to File and then just click Save. And in addition to saving it, that's just saving the Draw.io file, okay? You also want to go ahead and do an export on this too, so File, Export. And you choose SVG is fine. It could be, you know, PNG is fine as well, either one. Type in SVG here, and then go ahead and save this also to the same folder under your ERD. Hit Save. Okay. So in your folder, you should have both the draw file, draw IO file, and then also an SVG file, which looks like the default. It's going to open in Microsoft Edge. And it's awful slow here. Okay, so then you can also view it like that. So you make sure you want to do that, and then you want to go ahead and make sure you commit that, obviously, to GitHub. Okay, so we saved it. We're good there. Guess I can close this for now. All right, so that's our ERD. And then we're going to work on implementing the database. So the other two, you're going to have 4 exercises total. That was the first exercise. The next exercise is create a script called schema. So that's the next thing you want to do is create that same folder that you had from before. Under your lab, let me pull mine up here. So that was just your ERD. So outside your ERD, create a new folder there. Or, well, not a new folder, just a new file. A new text document. Call it schema.txt, even though you really don't do a schema, but it's just this more just for populating the database, right? Doing that, implementing the database. Okay, so create that in there. Good for now on that. I guess I can open it up. So when we cut paste, we'll be good to go on that. All right. Okay. So the next thing I want to do. So I know we kind of done a lot of different tools and stuff, and then it can be a little bit confusing. So next you want to go ahead and bring up Atlas, right? So you have basically, if you don't have a bookmark to it, you should bookmark it. Should be cloudmongodb.com, right? And you may need to log in, so go ahead and do that. I'm already logged in, but go ahead and log in. What I think we're going to go ahead and do here is, we use the shell, different ways to connect. So, we've done the shell stuff. And I think early on we did do Compass. We probably didn't go through that enough. But, we can access a shell within Compass, and there's a lot of advantages to it. It's got some completion stuff there. It does some syntax highlighting and that. So let's go ahead and do that. And you might already have things, I know that we already connected to it before, but I just want to kind of one more time here. So click on that. I have installed, so you're good there. And go ahead and copy that. I guess by default it's going to come in there. Go here, you're going to copy this, right? And then go ahead and go to, this ain't going to work. Yeah, it is. Sometimes it doesn't pop up. So go to Compass. Okay. And I'm going to, don't do what I'm doing. I'm going to remove mine for now. Okay. I'm going to do a new one, just so like same thing you'd be doing here, right? So that, and then you got to make sure, remember you got different passwords. Your password to log into your cluster is different than your password to log into MongoDB and Atlas, right? 2 different passwords. So So you're going to want to make sure you put your password, here, and get rid of both the greater than and less than sign. So all of that needs to be replaced with your password, and then you can call it what you want. I'm going to call mine, I think, just part of the course name. You can call yours whatever you want to call it. I'm going to move this over here for a minute. So put my password in there. You're probably already connected from before, but just in case you're not, just kind of want to go through that real quick. So once you put your password in there, you can call it so you can call it whatever you want here. I'm just going to call mine Summer 2025. And then I'm going to just do save and connect. You can do colors and everything else, whatever you want to do. Okay. And by default, it's going to put, I think it's picking up something that I already had, but that's okay. How that kind of does that. All right. But so here you've got your cluster that you created before, right? And for the other lab assignment that we're also going to have, we're going to have another sample database we're going to be using. Are we going to use mFlex? I need to look at that. I think we're fine. I think we're going to use mFlex again. But so you'll have this, okay? And then what you can do in here, a few different. If you ever want to remove these, you can always remove this. Like, I did a remove. You can remove these. Another thing here is, you see this one right here? That's the shell script. So this is the Mongosh, right? So you can click on this, and this will bring up Mongosh, okay? And by default, just the way MongoDB has it, you've got it always going to default to test, even though it really doesn't exist here. It's just how they do it, right? But what you can do is you don't have to create a new database. There's ways to do that, right? Like you can click over here, it says create database. You can do that in here, but you don't have to do it that way, okay? So if you're going to, depends on what you want to call yours database. You can call it what you want. It's an issue tracker, so I'm probably just going to call mine issue tracker. Call yours what you want. But what you can do here is just to use a database. Well, here, let's just go through these commands real quick. DBs, right? This is going to show you the different DBs. And like I was actually saying just a minute ago, it's kind of got this completion stuff. It'll really help you with different commands and stuff, right? So that's very beneficial, and it'll highlight some things. It's a little better than just doing it, how we kind of did the shell when we copied it over into command prompt and that. It's kind of a little, offers some little extras here, okay? So here's our databases here, but we want to create a new database. What you can just do is do use, and then we can call it, what I'm going to call mine is I'm going to call mine issue. I guess I'll just follow kind of what Mongo kind of does for their things. They got their sample. I'm going to just call it issue tracker. You can do what you want here. You can you could call it. It doesn't matter. Okay. You can make these all uppercase, whatever. That's up to you on that. Best practices, I don't know. Probably all lowercase. So I got this issue tracker. I'm just going to do issue tracker like that. I hit OK. Okay. And it switched to the database issue tracker, right? So just by doing that, it automatically created a database. Actually, if you come over here on the left-hand side, and you can click this here, and where was I at? Yeah, I was on the wrong one. I was up there, wasn't I? But on your cluster, you can click the little three dots here and click. If you look right now, you don't see it in here, right? So, but if you come over here, not that you need to see it, but just in case you start doing some stuff and you like, where's it at? It's there. It just needs to be refreshed. And now that I refreshed that, oh no, made me a liar. It's actually not creating it until you create something else. Okay. So what you can do next here is I'm going to go ahead. Let's look at the assignment real quick here. It will create it here in a minute. Sorry, I got a little ahead of myself. So what we're going to go ahead and do on this is we're going to create at least one index for each collection, and insert at least 2 documents into each collection. Okay. First, let's just go ahead. I'm going to create a user document. Okay. I'm going to create a user document. I'll create 2 user documents, and then we'll go ahead and create an index for that user, and I'll explain what the index is. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and then we refresh it and we'll see it. So here, then what I'm going to want to do is let me grab. So for this, you're going to do what's called insert one. Okay. Now you remember the entities when we created the entities in the ERD diagram. We created the entities. We used the uppercase U, which is no big deal, but it was singular, right? We have a user, a bug. Each one's a document, so we didn't have a plural. But here we're going to be using a collection. So what we're going to do here. So I created this. Are you going to be able to see all of this? That's the question. So here I created DB. So we're already in issue tracker. That's the important thing. You got to make sure that you're in the correct thing. If this doesn't say the database you expect it, then you need to then you need to go use issue tracker, right? So make sure that this is, no matter when you're adding another collection, especially if you've got a cluster and you've got multiple databases, you need to make sure, because I know I've done it before, and probably you will as well. You need to make sure you're in the right database before you start creating new collections and stuff. Okay, so here, make sure that you're in your issue tracker, whatever you want it to call it. That's fine, but we're in issue tracker, and now we're doing a db.users. Right? Even though we don't have a user's collection, this was going to actually create a collection. Okay, this is going to create that user's collection, and here we're doing a insert one, and we're giving it an email, a password, a given name, a family name, the full name, and the role. Okay, all comment separated, basically field value pairs, right? Name value pairs. Just make sure that you close the curly brace, and then after the curly brace, you want your end parentheses. Okay. And then obviously it's best, hopefully you're kind of, not that you need to look at your ERD, but, you really want to follow that all, as much as possible. If you end up changing it, then you kind of really want to change your ERD, right? If you call something different. But most of these are actually the required ones that are stated in the document for the lab and for the final project. So this is what you want to do to create one. Create this new user. And put that in your collection. So I'm going to hit enter here. And it's going to come back with a acknowledgement of true, meaning that it did create it. All right, it did create it, and you've got a inserted ID. There's your ID. Like I said, you don't have to include your ID. MongoDB is automatically going to assign create a new ID to assign to that document. Right, And then obviously if you came in here and did db.users .find here, there's the object, there's the document we just created. And like I said earlier, not this is a big deal, I don't know, but you know, it isn't over here, you don't see it. But now that you've created actually a record in the collection, now that you got a record there, it's going to show that, right? So I'm going to come over here and click refresh. And now you see issue tracker here, and you see your users. And that's another way. You can actually update data within here if you prefer, okay? Or you can do command line. I kind of prefer command line, but you know, you can play with this and see if this is something that you want to change, then you know, you can do this as well, okay? It's a different option for you. All right. It's always good. It's an easier way to look at it, especially when you start getting a bunch of records. It's nice to look at it that way, though, too, instead of having to try to do it within the shell, especially from a visual standpoint, read-only looking at it. But you, like I said, you can also update this as well. Lots of options, right? Okay, so now we've got a user document, right? So I'm going to go ahead and create one more. And what you can kind of actually do, well, here actually, so since you already created that, you probably should take that and you can copy this that you created, and then go to your schema file that you created and just copy that in there. Okay, copy that in there. So that's the first one. And now what you can actually do, if you want, you could just copy this again, and then, you know, change all your fields, right? That's one way. You can type it right in the shell if you want, or you can just do it like this, and then, you know, I already have another one created here, but so I'm just going to overwrite this one. So here's my second one. I got John Doe here, pretty much the same. Besides that, just the name difference there. And so I'm going to go ahead and insert this one as well. So here you can't, like, sometimes, you know, I know like in the shell, if you use the shell in the command prompt, you can kind of like right click and copy. Here you're going to have to really do Control C. Let me see here. I mean, Control V, right? Copying it from there, and then hit Control V here. You can't just right click. Sometimes you can right click on things, but you're going to have to do Control V, right? Control C to copy it out of your file, and then Control V to copy it within the shell here. So I'm just doing another DB into the users collection. I'm doing an insert one, just a different username, right? All right. Hit enter. And that was worked, you know, gave return true, and so now you've got this other object ID, okay? And then, so now we're going to go ahead and create an index. And so just real quick, what an index is in MongoDB, you can create like a compound index on like what we're going to do is create a compound index on the user collection. Here, let me just show you what this is. And actually here, let me do this. Instead of doing it down at the bottom. To clear the screen, CLS on here, right? If you want to clear the screen, go back up here to the top. Let me copy that. So here, create index. This will create an index. And so this specifies that the index should be built on both the email and password fields. The one indicates ascending order for the index on both fields. Okay. If you have a 0, it's going to be descending, but a 1 will be ascending. Okay. And it all depends on, and so this can be helpful with like sorts and stuff. And we'll cover this more in the future. Okay, we'll go through this more in the future. But this means that queries filtering or sorting by email. Okay, it'll be more. It's going to be more efficient. Okay, and we'll talk about that more in the future. But this is going to create an index on the user table. Okay, and this is what you need to do for these tables. Let's see what that direction said on that real quick here. Create for each collection. So yeah, for each collection, you're going to want to do that. Okay. All right. So this will create that index. And it doesn't like say success, but it does this. And so you know it is good. Okay. We'll get into that more in the future, what that does. But so for that, create an index for that one and for the bug one. So I'm going to go ahead and add a bug now. Okay, before we do the create index for the bug. Here, well, I kind of lost my other command here earlier, didn't I? So here, you kind of want to grab this as well, right? Shift and I want to copy all that. I hope that copied. So you want to like keep on putting all these into your schema. I already did I? Duh. So there's that. And then you want to kind of include your index that you put as well, right? So you want to add these all. Because one good thing is at some point in time, you may want to kind of redo some things. And at least you'll have some base stuff to redo it, okay? Instead of starting from scratch, okay? So save that. And then what I'm going to need, though, one thing I'm going to need is when I go ahead and put a bug in here, I'm going to need a user ID because I have to have an author, right, at the minimum. So so I guess I'll just use this one here. I'm going to copy this. Will that right click? Will that work for me here? That should work for me here though. No, it didn't. So yeah, so what you're going to have to do here too is you can double click on this. I'm sure you can't see it on your screen, but you double click on that. It's highlighting this. You can barely see that. You're going to have to hit Control if you want to, Control C to copy, Control C here to copy as well. And then you can paste it into a document, right? So I'm going to create a bug. And for that bug, I need an author. Now, yeah, so, it also has a bug, also has a assigned ID, the user it's assigned to, but, usually that doesn't happen at the beginning. A bug gets created, in the real world, and then, obviously the author is the person who created that bug. But the assignment usually happens later on. We decide who to assign that to, right? That's somebody's responsibility to decide that, okay? So I'm going to create a bug here for that. And I used this object ID of this user as the author. Let me go back to the... So I have a title, right? Title. So, well, first I'm creating a new collection by doing this, right? Since currently right now there's no bugs collection, right? There's only a users collection. By me executing this command, it will actually create that bugs collection, right? And it's going to do an insert one. And so I have a title here and a description of the bug. And just an author. Now, obviously, you're going to want to do a little more than this. This is just kind of, just a base thing, you're going to enter more fields than this. Okay, this is just kind of step one, right? Just follow the directions to say in a lab. But so here I'm just creating an author, a description, a title, and that's it. All right. All right. And now if I hit the enter key here, what was my index title? Okay. So I'm going to, after we do this, I'm going to create an index with title and author. Okay. So there's the enter key there. Obviously, you're going to want to copy this. Or if you already had it, if you created it in your file, I'm getting it from a different file. You want to go ahead and save that in your schema.txt or text, schema.txt file. So now, true, it was good. So obviously, we just go look at that real quick. db.bugs.find. And there's our bug. Okay, and then obviously come over here, like I was saying earlier, it's not over there unless you refresh it. Refresh databases, and now you have your bugs collections as well. Okay. All right, and then we're going to go ahead and do and create another index. I have a habit of trying to right-click in here to think that that's going to work, but it doesn't. Okay, and now we're creating an index on the bugs with a title and an author. Okay, like I said, I'll talk more about indexes tomorrow. We'll go through that a little bit more tomorrow. Okay, this will go ahead and create an index for the bugs. Hit enter, and it's basically telling you created an index. Okay, so that's that. So now we've got our bugs collection and our users collection. So you're going to be wanting to do pretty much the same thing for the other ones as well. Okay. And you'll have to make sure that if you've got, let me bring up the ERD here. That's the wrong thing. Here, let me bring up this one. So you're going to have to make sure that you have, at any time you've got a field like a user ID here, which, this is actually an old thing. We changed these to all IDs up here, right? ID for each document. But if you have a user ID, you create a bug like we just did for the author, we have to have a user ID. So wherever you've got if you have an ID, like here, added by for this test case, added by this user ID, right? So you're gonna have to make sure you copy one of the user IDs, right? What did I want to mention here? Oh, real quick. Make sure when you're creating an ID, use this object ID just like this. Okay? So for the author, you had an author colon. This was the bug that we inserted. And we have a object ID like this. If you just do author and put in the number, it's just going to create a string. It's not going to really create a real object ID. So you want to make sure that you do it like that, so that this is what you will see. Okay, and this is what come down here. This is what you'll see down here. So here's your ID for your bug, right? Here's your ID for your bug. And then here's your ID for your user. And to have this object ID, if you just put in that single string, right, without the object ID, it's just going to be and it won't really be an object ID. So you want to make sure you use object ID on that. So you're going to want to go ahead and do the same thing for these other ones as well. on these other entities. You got your edit. You got your edits, your edit. This was somebody else's, and I think that it's correct to not have an S on here or on any of these because it's a single entity. It's just a bug. It's not a collection of bugs. It's just one, right? This is all the fields in a bug, right? A comment, etc. A user, right? Where you have the plural is going to be when you name your collection because it's a list. It's a collection of users or a collection of bugs, right, within Mongo. But you're going to have to do the same thing for edit, comments. We already got bugs for these other three, right? And what's, you don't necessarily need to include everything. Well, these you include everything. They're pretty small, right? Here for bugs, pretty much here for the users, we'll put in everything. For bugs, not all of these are going to necessarily, you don't, we didn't assign anything to it, whatever. Probably should have your crate on. Probably should really still have a crate on. What does this ask you to do here on the... I don't see it being a problem here. I just remember you can always go in there and edit that, right? And it probably would be beneficial actually to learn to use the... so if I click on bugs here, it's going to show me my bugs. So, you can always add these things in here, right? You can always add stuff in here. You can add another field, whatever, right? So this is another way, especially if you got pre-existing data you already have in there. It's an easy way to do it. Otherwise, sometimes it's kind of a, you can still update those fields. You can do that command line as well. So, there's pluses and minuses. If you got a lot of data, you don't want to do this. You don't want to do this with a lot of data if you're going to update a field. Only if you have just a small amount of data. The other way is just you could do a update, and you can update multiple ones if you want, right? Just command line stuff. But we'll worry about that later. So, okay. So like I said, go ahead and work on those other ones, and we'll go from there. Please let me know if you have any questions. Like I said, besides just exercise 2 is creating the data like we just did. But you're going to do the same for the other ones as well. Populate all your collections with data, and then you're going to run some queries on that, right? I was just seeing they do not have test cases. List all bugs that do not have. Okay, yeah, you're just going to do some queries on that. So, okay, yep. Please let me know if you have any questions about anything. Have a good day.